guess. Patapatash, Stephen, thank you very much for that great introduction. And thank you for Orleans Land Conservatory for being here tonight. This has been a great project that Stephen was talking about, doing the Three Sisters Garden, which my cousin helped out doing, and building this weed-to out here for a place of learning. And that's where Susie up there, I see you bring your kids out there and Rand and teach them on the outdoors. There's nothing better than having an outdoor classroom. I do it quite a bit. I just got back from Gloucester, up in the Cape Cod Museum, and we also built a weed-to up there. We have a canoe, and all week long I taught 16 classes from the surrounding towns outside. Ipswich, Rockport, Essex, and that was awesome. That was pretty awesome. So bring the kids from indoors to outdoors is something special, and they love it. It's a whole different way of learning. So what we're gonna do today, guys, is I'm gonna bring you on a roller coaster, ride of emotion. There's a lot of things that happen to our people, the good, bad, the ugly. We tell the truth, right? And me being the director at Plimoth for so long of the Wampanoag Indigenous Program, that's what we did. We didn't hide behind not telling the truth, because that's what people want to hear. It's how we deliver the product itself. Like, we can talk about corn beans and squash and talk about the first time that you saw enslavement on our lands in 1636, all one breath, but we felt like it's how you direct the conversation to the guest, and that was very important. So, like I said, I was there for 30 years with the Education Department in Mashpee, also on my own, doing my own thing. So October, November, this is a busy time of year for myself right now. I'm all over the place. And this 13-moon presentation, it brings you through a cycle, a 13-moon cycle, which is 1 year, how we live for thousands of years, and a lot of these things we still do today. Like this, for thousands of years we've been here, right, on this land, which is very important. Some say 12,000, 13,000, but my people, the originals, right, have been here, and our indigenous people. And land is very big for our people, you know. Where you sit, where I stand is who we are as a people. There's no difference. For the way we think as a culture, we're here to honor Mother Earth, be with Mother Earth, be part of it, but as one. That's very important. That's how we wake up, and that's how we go to bed in the evening. There's no difference. There's no boundaries. Okay, this is where you live, this is where I live. And that's what eventually caused conflict years back. But we don't believe in ownership of land. We believe if nobody lives there, go ahead and settle there, you know? And we're gonna get into a little history of why the people were allowed to settle here, and there's a good reason why for them when they got here, what happened to our folks. But going back over 12, 13,000 years, you got Wampanoag country that spread past Boston. Like I said, where I was just at was Gloucester, right? And we believe that's where we board before another nation starts, right by the Merrimack River up there, that go down south throughout Cape Cod, going out to central Massachusetts and parts of Rhode Island. And amongst that area, we have about 70 Wampanoag communities, right? If you went back in time and went up to somebody around here and asked them, hey, what are you? They probably wouldn't say Wampanoag, because Wampanoag is a nation of people. And if you know this area, you know to expect the name of the community, right? So they'll say, I'm a Nauset. Or you go farther down Cape, you might say I'm a Michon, or a Pommet, or Manamoyet, right? You got Agawam, you got Nantucket, you got Mattapoisett, you got Seekonk. There's a lot of indigenous Wampanoag community names that you guys might be familiar with. They've taken out town names, but they've always been in those communities. And so you look at it for Wampanoag population. It's hard to do a census back then, but we guesstimate over 100,000 people at one time before disease hit. And today, in 2025, there's about 20,000 of us living still, okay, amongst different areas, right? But those communities will govern themselves. Those communities will have their leadership, will have their chief, would have their councilmen, would have their children, moms, aunts, clan mothers. And you hear about Massoit, the great Wampanoag leader. A lot of people don't realize Massoit governed one Wampanoag community, and that was Pokanoket, and that was 40 miles west of here, right? West of Plymouth, I should say. The reason he's so famous is he's the one the English dealt with mainly. So that's what they wrote down. But we know he was a community of Pokanoket, and what is known as Bristol, Rhode Island today. But what I want to do is start you out how we live for our New Year's, right? How we live, everybody has New Year's. And for us, we have our New Year's when everything comes to life, guys. And when everything comes to life, that's in the springtime. Everybody gets that. That's when the birds start chirping. That's when the plants start coming out of the land. The flowers start coming out. So we thank Mother Earth. We thank the Creator for having another year because it's not always guaranteed. That's our start of our cycle. So what we do is we come out, move away from our winter community, which will hold 3,000 or 4,000 people, and that's where you got the Nauset, the Mishon, those communities right there. And we come out near the ocean, right? We come out near the rivers. And we live in homes like you see here. This is a cattail mat covered house. And cattail is a water plant. You harvest them in late September and August, cut them down. You would dry them, and you make them into mats. So you see this all along the shoreline. There's a very famous map that was made in 1605. Samuel Champlain came down here, but he also went to Plymouth, right, what we call Patuxet, and drew a map of what he saw before plague hit. And what he saw was a number of these houses along the shoreline, and he saw cornfields. He was encountered by native people, the Patuxet Wampanoag out there, in their Mashpee, their boats. And they wanted him to come inland to feast, right? But he couldn't because his boats were too heavy, so they couldn't get any farther than he was in the bay. So he left, departed, and came down here. The best way I can describe how we lived during the spring and summer, if you folks know about the Midwest, right? You got a farmhouse, fields. You drive up the road a little bit, see another farmhouse with more fields. And that's how we lived during the spring and summer. If you're out in a canoe, a Mashpee, in a boat, you would have seen one of these houses. Then right next to the house, you would have seen cornfields like you see here, corn, beans, and squash. Over 2/3 of what we ate was vegetables, so you'd have see very, very big fields. So you live within shouting distance of each other. A planting field for a family might take up, 2-3 acres of land. And the people who take care of this land are considered to be the women. The women are considered to be the givers of life. They give life to babies, but they also give life to Mother Earth, the ground. So also all in tune with Mother Earth, the land, and how we think. So while they do that, these guys, these are actually my kids right here. I got 4 girls, right? Yeah, and 2 grandchildren. This is Tashima and Storm. On a sidebar, this comes from a really good thing we worked with Scholastic back in 2016, right? What we did is they came to us and said, hey, we want to make a little documentary of Wampanoag children and their families during Pilgrim's times. I said, okay, we've done that already. We can do part of it like that, but we also want to show you and other folks, other kids and adults, how we live today. So we produced this documentary, a little documentary called The Wampanoag Way. And if you know Massachusetts, that's the part of the 3rd grade curriculum. We gauge it for the 3rd graders. And it shows Tashima and Storm picking berries like you see here, sumac berries to make tea, which is good for, it's high in vitamin C. It shows Tashima and Storm playing double ball, a traditional native Wampanoag game. But it also shows Tashima and Storm riding bikes, going to school with their backpacks, wearing clothing like people wear today. And that's how people get it, right? That's how kids, we're not gone. The biggest thing educators do is put us in the past tense. And that's the thing I ask teachers please not to do, because we haven't gone anywhere. We don't have the numbers, but we're still here. And I'm in this documentary too, right? I'm the dad. I played the dad, but I am the dad. And I visit a lot of schools, and there was one school I went to which I was playing this video because that's what they do. They give a little more Wampanoag history before I come in. And one kid saw me on the screen and looked back at me, saw me come into the room, looked at the screen again. He said, you're Tashima's dad. I go, yeah, I am Tashima's dad. So it was like a surreal moment for him, which is pretty awesome. And they always want to know how old these kids are now. We made this back in 2016, and Tashima's 20, and Storm's 18. But we don't go by numbers, more or less in our culture for thousands of years. We go by maturity levels. Each person grows up differently, and as a child grew up, that child will be given different responsibilities and different names. Like Tashima, what that means in Wampanoag is one who lifts up. Because Tashima wakes up in a good mood almost every single day. And when she wakes up in a good mood, everybody feels good, so that's why our name's at right now still. But kids are kids, they're allowed to play until they get older and go by maturity, the levels themselves. So While they did that, the men did a lot of the fishing during the spring and summer. Everything we did for fishing, we did back then, we have today, right? We had harpoon, we had spears, we had hook and line, although back then we used lobster as fishing bait. I don't know many people who use lobster as fishing bait today. We had so much lobster that we would go down the beach at low tide and pick lobster off the beach. I'm not saying we didn't eat it, but it was not a big deal like it is today. You can go back 100 years ago, lobster was fed to prisoners in jail, right? And the prisoners had a big uprising. They were so sick of eating it, they didn't want it anymore. So the state of Massachusetts had to make a law that you only can feed lobster to prisoners twice a week. If you did it any more than that, it's considered to be inhumane. And that was just over 100 years ago, right? Fast forward now, and now it's a delicacy. We have so much flounder in the water that you can go down out in the water, low tide, spear flounder. Codfish, they say, can walk around the backs of P-Town, right? So it wasn't our term survival to use back then, right? We try to keep away from that because survival is not knowing what you're doing, not having a plan at all. For us, we have our elders who taught us the way we think, how to think about the land, how to think about the earth, and how to live, not survive. You just didn't wake up one morning and say, oh, geez, what do I do today? There's a system set up for thousands and thousands of years, and it wasn't a struggle. Plenty of food, plenty of fish, plenty of vegetables, plenty of meats. So we did this a lot during spring and summer. We fished, we planted, we had celebrations. We had our first celebration after New Year's was our strawberry moon celebration, Thanksgiving. We celebrate that strawberry coming out. And once again, we give thanks to Mother Earth, thank the Creator for having that strawberry come out. It's a huge celebration. We're a culture which we like to joke around a lot. We tell a lot of stories, right? And that's how we educate our people too, through verbal communication. So we live like that during the spring and summer in family groups. During the winter, we go inland. Inland does not have to be far. Inland might be a mile, 2 miles inland. And what you're looking for is a large settlement of woods or a very, very steep valley. You try to get away from the wind chill factor, right? And this is a house that we would live in, bark-covered house. Like I said, we just built a weed-two out here. We left it open exposed on purpose because Susie up there wants to teach how the science of the frame works, science of how the roofing works. Because you see this house, right? It's round, so when the winds blow, the winds will go right around it. So that's one reason we did round houses, and also because of heat inside. When heat rises, it'll go up, go down underneath the mats, force the cold air onto the fire, keeps the warm air going around in circles. When the English got here, they recorded that Wampanoag houses got to be so warm, they saw little kids running outside naked during the winter and jumping into the snow. I've been inside these houses during hurricanes, right? Now, the last major hurricane, I'm going to date myself here, right? You folks might remember this if you lived here. Back in 91, right? Hurricane Bob. And I was at the museum. We were trying to protect our houses, and the houses did not get damaged at all because the winds were right around it. I was watching something on the Weather Channel during another hurricane, and the storm was so severe down in the Keys that the Weather Channel was getting nervous, right? So they found a house that was a dome-shaped house built by an architect, right? And they pounded on the door, let us in, can you let us in? And he did. But that dome-shaped house, that's the only house that stood up to that hurricane. So there's a reason why we do what we do. And we found the largest footprint of a house that was found out in Worcester. That footprint was 360 foot in length and 60 foot in width. I tell folks, if you're not good with numbers, think of a football field. And that's how big this house was. Now, was it just a house? My opinion, no, because that is right where we end and the Nipmuc people begin. So that might have been a community lodge. What we do during the winter to keep busy is for our food is hunt. That's my buddy Tim. He's plucking a turkey. Wild turkey and deer are the most common animals hunted for. You have black bear, moose, elk. You can use bow and arrow, deadfall traps, snares. Small animals like raccoons, squirrels, beavers, otters. You folks like the taste of skunk? No? Never had it, right? Skunk is considered to be a Wampanoag delicacy, right? And the way you catch them, you get two boys. One boy will be in front of the skunk distracting him. You get the other boy that'll sneak upon him from behind, and he will grab his tail and lift him off the ground. In order for a skunk to spray, he has to be on all fours, putting pressure on his hind legs to release the stink glands. You get him up there in the air, he can't do that. And that's when you knock them out and very carefully cut the stink glands out, and there's nothing wrong with the meat. It tastes like chicken. It's a sweet, sweet meat. Sweet. And this is a lot of the time women spend their time. They cook, they weave. Our women are well-known weavers for all around North America, right? Still today, the Comey Wild Horses, right? The Daisy Moore Haynes. We made string. You'd be amazed when I tell folks we had string. You guys have string? Well, yeah, we made string from plant fibers. We use milkweed, dogbane, and the bark of a basswood tree. We take those fibers out, we work them together, and that's how we get our string. When the English got here, they recorded that Wampanoag woman was making string so fast that the eyes couldn't keep up with. Mm-hmm. And once we made the string, we would dye it with different types of berries and roots from the ground for the different coloring. Our culture, we have a lot of adornment, right? We put decoration in everything we do, even our own bodies. Tattoo and facial paint. Our clothing, paint our clothing, so feather work. That's what we're known for. A lot of our work today is at the Smithsonian, at the National Museum and American Indian, and a lot of our weaving down in DC. Yeah, the women also cook inside. This is from the Wampanoag Way. Now you can see how the inside of the house is. We have clay pots, like you see there. Very small ones to very big ones, about 4 feet high off the ground. That's Storm and Tash just got done making the tea. But the beds will be all around the inside. Most of our life was spent outside. You didn't spend too much time inside, unless the weather conditions will get really bad. So that's kind of how we lived before we had, I call it interruption. Our culture lived the same way thousands of years. It came out to the same planting area, same fishery, chicken areas, hundreds of thousands of years, same place in the winter. You live amongst nature, the land being just one, no difference, right? Until there was an interruption that happened. And now this right here, this is pre-contact before the European English got here, right? There's terms put on these people. Pre-1620, they say they were fishermen, they were traders, they were explorers. If you got to say that in one breath, you got to add on enslavers, because this is a fact. This is what they wrote down. This is what was considered to be normal. They even got down to how many Native people they took on the boats with them. And the idea was, let's take these folks with us, let's bring them to Europe, let's teach them how to speak our language, then bring them back as guides and interpreters. Most of us never made it back because disease happened, and we died over there. But there's a very famous one that did. Everybody's heard of him, Squanto. You know, he was taken in 1614 by, you guys heard of John Smith, right? Everybody heard of John Smith? He mapped out New England in 1614. When John Smith left, he left his fishing captain behind. That was Thomas Hunt. Thomas Hunt landed in what is known as Plymouth today, Patuxet, and took 19 Patuxet Wampanoag as slaves, and Squanto was one. He actually landed down here and took 8 Nauset as slaves. The leader down here, his name was Aspinet. So 8 were taken from here, brought to Spain. Some were sold to Spain. The remainder were sold to England, right? We know Squanto for a fact. He was sold to a merchant named John Slaney. And they say he gained some type of status over there. What status meant over London during that time for a Native person, I have no idea. And I've asked a lot of English scholars, what does that mean? And they can't give me a clear picture of what that meant. I know what would happen to us. We were put on in storefronts, exotic specimens. I know that happened. But when Squanto was over London, right, living with Slaney, the most high impacted thing that ever happened to our people happened. Squanto was over England in 1614. I'm gonna throw a lot of detail at you guys. 1614 to 1619, right? During that time, plague hit around here. People's skin turned yellow. People got open sores in their bodies. People died within 2 or 3 days. What was this? You know, old interpretation used to be hepatitis. Some people say smallpox. We don't think so today. What disease control came out with a little over 15 years ago, they believe it's leptospirosis, right? And that was from farther up north, northern Maine, southern Canada. And up there you had French trade ships that would go over, and on those trade ships they would have rats. And the rats would get into the water system. The fetus of the rats created an infectious liver disease that went along the coastline. Now it goes through Maine, right? Goes 30, 40 miles inland, wipes out whole nations of people, And from Wampanoag population, it wiped out up to 90% of our people within 2 or 3 years. And this is a year before the Pilgrims arrived, 1 year. Now it stops dead in its tracks, right? It stops by Narragansett Bay. Why is that? Why go from northern Maine, sweep along the coastline and stop right there? I have 2 good guesses, right? Down there, you got the Narragansett people, and the Narragansetts and the Wampanoag do not like each other. And if you don't like each other, you don't have that physical contact with each other. 2, you got Narragansett Bay. Narragansett Bay down there is a large body of water, so it's hard for disease to go over water. We know, like Nantucket, Penakees, the islands out there, a lot of those indigenous people weren't affected by that plague because of being out in the water itself. Okay? So what happens afterwards, right, after the decimation of my people is, this boat shows up. Everybody knows this boat, right? The Mayflower. You know, it wasn't, you guys are from down here, so you know Plymouth wasn't their first stop. They first stopped in Provincetown, and they scouted out the land, you know. There was actually the future governor-to-be, his name being William Bradford. He wasn't governor yet. He led some men into the woods, right? And he stepped on a deer snare and he got launched up in the air. And his men found him hanging by one leg in the middle of the woods. A lot of folks are like, did he die? No, he didn't die. He became governor. But the rest of his life, he complained how sore his hip was. And when we worked in Plymouth, right, near the Pilgrim Village and the Wampanoag home site, and I knew the Pilgrims up there who played characters, and I was friends with them. So what I used to do is send all the kids up there, because they're in first person, we were in third person. And I go ask William Brad, the governor, how his hip's doing today. So Doug used to play his name, Darius, I'm getting all these questions every day about my hip. He knew I was a prank, so he goes, you're the one doing it. Like, yeah, I am. What? How is your hip anyways, yeah. So yeah, we know this boat landed. A lot of things happened when they first got down here. There were 2 parties of people, right, men that went out. One party of men went out and turned over graves and took from graves. The other party of men went out and turned over graves, but realized they were graves and reburied them. Before our first encounter, there were native storage pits, corn taken from, which I might have done the same thing because they were hungry. And the first physical confrontation happened between the 2 people, right? There were musket balls shot off. Nauset, the leader, Aspinet, his men fired off arrows. It was fortunate for them on both sides, nobody got killed during that first encounter. Why did it happen? I always want to ask the question, why did it happen? Was it because what Thomas Hunt did 5 years before, when he came over, 1614, and took 8 in Nauset from here as slaves? Maybe, good chance. Was it because of the turning of the graves? Good chance. Or taking of the corn? Pick one of the 3, or pick all 3. But they weren't allowed to stay here, and that's when they landed in Plymouth. I'm going to talk to you a lot of dates, right? So when Squanto was over England, right, in 1619, this is going back a year, right? Let's go back a year, say. There was a very wealthy man over there, and his name was Sophronis Gorges. Sophronis Gorges, he was a well-known, highly praised merchant who was funding a lot of these trips over here. And he was asking around, who's from Patuxet, this area? And they said, well, Squanto is. But now he's over up with Captain Mason, scouting out Newfoundland. He actually took off with Captain Mason. And he said, you know what? I'm going to hire Thomas Dermer, another captain. I want you to go pick up Squanto up in Newfoundland and come along the coast and do some scouting, okay? This is in 1619. So he hired Captain Dermer. Dermer picked up, found Squanto, picked him up, and went along the coastline. Imagine what Squanto was thinking. Squanto being taken in 1614, pre-contact, pre-plague, and seeing the devastation going along the coastline. They stopped. They stopped in Mohegan Island in Maine and picked up a Sagamore, a leader, and his name was Samoset. Okay? They went over, they stopped in Patuxet. Squanto saw most of his people died. Not everybody, but a lot of them did. And that's when they get kind of grayish, right? We know they went to what is known as the vineyard today, what we call Kapawakanope. And that's when Dermer's ship got attacked by the leader over there. His name was Epinel. Why was the ship attacked? Well, I can tell you, in 1611, think his name was Captain Hobson, took Epino as a slave in 1611, brought him to England. He lived there 3 years as an indentured servant. Epino was a chief. He was a leader. He was not a dumb man, right? Gore just asked Epino in 1614, hey, is there gold where you're at? He said, sure. You bring me back home, I'll show you where all the gold's at. So he brought Epino and a few other Native people back home. And this is in 1614, right? I think it was Howland, Captain Howland. When they came to shore, he called out something in the native tongue which they did not understand. A lot of men, Epino's men came out to the beach and attacked the ship. And that's when he had a chance to swim or jump over and swim to the shore. Now you fast forward 5 years, right? You go to 1619. Epino's probably thinking, not this again. So he attacks Derma's ship, and that's when Squanto and Samoset jumped over and had a chance and took off. We pretty much think they ended up in Massasoit's community of Pokanoket, right? And when the Pilgrims were building their houses back in December of 1620, we believe they were there at that time in Pokanoket. For them, January and February was the deadliest months period for the colonists. A lot of them died, especially during February. They say they wrote down they saw 3 or 4 sightings of Native people. They saw people on Clark's Island, about 3 miles out in Plymouth Harbor. They said they saw people walking their dogs. They said they saw 2 men on a hill, and both parties were calling to each other, but neither party went to each other, okay? But they heard voices beyond the hill. Now, March of 1621, Massasoit's trying to figure out, what are these people doing here? One thing I'm used to, right? I'm used to people coming over, but I'm also used to people leaving. I'm not used to people coming over and staying and bringing women and children and building houses. So this was a different type of people, right? So he goes to Samoset. He says, Samoset, come here. You know the English, right? You can speak their language. You dealt with a lot of these folks before. Why don't you go into the Pilgrim village, go into Patuxet and find out what's going on with these people? So Samoset did. March 1621 walks into the village and greets the English by saying hello in their own language. What the formal greeting was, I don't know, but it was English. And they sat him down. He told them about the plague, told them about the disease that came through, that people once lived there. And I find it ironic, a little different, that he spent a night in the English village. He stayed with Stephen Hopkins, right? And I'm thinking, why did he stay with Stephen Hopkins? And I asked my historian, one of the historians at Plymouth, he said, well, Stephen Hopkins was the only Englishman who ever dealt with Native people before, because he was in Jamestown in 07. So maybe that's why it's up there. But he stayed overnight. He told the folks there, I'm not from here. I'm going to bring you a leader who is. And that's when he brought Massasoit. Massasoit came back. He brought 60 of his men, his sub-chief, his brother Quataquina, and that's when that very famous treaty between the two people happened. It happened between Pokanoket and Plymouth Colony, not any other community around, okay? So basically what the treaty stated was, if you go to war, I'm gonna help you out, and if I go to war, you help me out. Aside from that, we're gonna keep separate lives, right? Why did they need an alliance? Because what happened prior? You had traders coming over with a different way of thought, who were taking Native people. We know how you felt for the colonists being here, it would vary on what community you went to. If you go to Combaton's community at Mattapoisett, they weren't liked being here. He did not like the English. If you go to Canonicus, Narragansett leader, same thing. So it wasn't a 100% way of thought on what people thought about how Massasoit was doing. They didn't like what he was doing, a lot of people. So they needed protection. And for us, because of the plague that hit, it did not affect the Narragansett people at all. And we felt the Narragansett encroaching on our land, well, the land and our people. So we felt that pressure. And the English had something of difference. They had something what was called the musket, and it wasn't seen before, right? So maybe something of intimidation. And what the Narragansett could have been thinking, if Massasoit's making a treaty with one boat, he might be making a treaty with all the boats that are coming back and forth. So that happened. Oh, what is this? Thanksgiving, right? Everybody's heard of this, right? This is the first time after Squanto went to go live amongst the English, which he did. He stayed in Plymouth Colony. He taught them how to plant corn, that's true. And they had a very, very big garden that first year, planting field. The feast happens late September, early October, and they never ever mentioned turkey being at that feast. No record of turkey being there. They mentioned fowl being there. Fowl could have been ducks, partridge, quail, goose. It could have been turkey, we don't know. But we knew for a fact we're a gifting people. And they don't even say if Massasoit was invited. They say in the primary sources that when Massasoit shows up, he brings 90 of his men along. Imagine come for dinner with bringing 90 men along. But also when he came, they said he brought 5 deer as gifts and were given to Governor Bradford. The feast goes on for 3 days. It was an act of diplomacy between the two people, okay? It only happened 1 year in 1621. This guy right here, wasn't because of him, history would have been different today. This was Massasoit's right-hand man. His name was Hoppenmock. And Massasoit's community being so far west, 40 miles, he needed a liaison out in Plymouth to live amongst the English, and that's what Hoppenmock did. Hoppenmock was sent with his family of over 10 people to live right in between Stephen Hopkins and Howland's fields, cornfields. He was the closest native they would consider to be a friend. He knew how to speak English, because Massasoit would not have sent him out if he couldn't speak English. Where he learned, I don't know, maybe from being brought over and brought back. He lived out amongst the English about 15 years, 1630s. There's records showing him going to live with Miles Standish up in Duxbury. So we don't know what happened to his family. We know he had a wife or more than one wife. We know one of those wives was a person of high stature, but they did not record their names back then. The English did not write down the women's names, and I wish they did. It didn't happen too often, because she was highly recognized amongst the area. She was sent to deliver Massasoit messages from Hoppenmock, well trusted. Now going back to Massasoit, right? He comes out in Plymouth in 1621. He comes out again during Thanksgiving. He comes out once again in 1623 when Governor Bradford gets remarried in August 18th, 1623. And this we know for a fact he was invited. When Massasoit comes out, they say he brings 6 score of men. If you know what a score is 20. So he brings 120 men to Governor Bradford's wedding. He brings 4 leaders, 4 or 5 different communities, Connecoon from Manmet and a few others, with their spouses. He comes out with his wife, and we did this reenactment in Plymouth a couple of years, 2010 and 15. And Massasoit, his wife, and it's one of his boys, his oldest boy named Warm Sutter, who they eventually called Alexander. And one of the guests, what was his name? Was it Pratt? He was from London. Was looking at Massasoit's boy, and I don't know what this meant at all, but he wanted to keep Massasoit's boy. He asked Massasoit personally, "Can I have your boy?" And that's a different type of request right there. So Massasoit said, "No, you can't have my boy." But that would happen in 1623. What happens in the records from 1623 to 1639, there's nothing much written about the two people interacting, which is kind of weird, a 16-year gap. 1639 pops up. Massasoit once again comes out to Plymouth, realigns the alliance with the people, and that's when they give Warm Sutter's name Alexander. We know Massasoit died in 1660. We know Bradford died in, I think it was 58 or 57, Governor Bradford. So you got the 2 leaders on both sides that were gone, and I can tell you the 1660s wasn't anything nice. I did a study, and I went decade by decade. And I studied the laws of Plymouth Colony and Mass Bay and what is Boston. And you can see the gradual decline between the two people. And the reason I did this study is I wanted to find out where and when they outlawed our ceremonies, That's the first part of colonization. And I found one of the first records. I thought it was Plymouth Colony, but it was actually Mass Bay. And it reads like this, right? November 4th, 1646. If any Indian is caught powwowing or celebrates the false gods on English land, they should be fined if it was 10 pounds. So what that meant is we couldn't sing our songs, which is part of our ceremonies, anymore. And that was just one law. And I asked an English scholar, what does 10 pounds mean? And he said, well, it derives for an Englishman, that was a half a year salary for an Englishman. Could you imagine what it meant for us as Native people? But anyways, you can see decade by decade, it slowly declines, right? And what happens, like I said, there was place on Christianity. This goes back to way before the colonists got here. This goes back to the 1400s with the doctrine of discovery. Christianity was placed on numerous people around the world. And what was happening around here in Massachusetts is there was praying towns being popped up, right? This right here is the oldest meeting house in the United States. You guys might have seen this before. It's right in my community in Mashpee. It dates back to, I think, 1668, I want to say. We have a native cemetery right there. But there were praying towns popping up, right, from missionaries. You had the Richard Bournes, you had the Cottonwoods, you had the Mayhew family, you had the John Elliots, right? The first praying town was in 1651. And it was kind of like you had to go, if not, you might not live, and that's a fact for Native people. In 1651, Eliot started Native. And what he was doing, right, is recording all these people in their confessions, right? And a lot of these people were chiefs, people of statue. There's a great book out, you guys should read it, take a look at it. It's called Tears of Repentance. It's a pamphlet of confessions at which Native people would have to do to be a Christian, right? And it's called Tears of Repentance because these confessions, you read them from their own words, and you can tell they didn't fully understand what they were basically signing up for, because we have our own ways of doing things. And it showed the tears going into the page. And what Eliot did in 1653, he took those confessions over to London because he wanted more funding to do his work here, and made a book called Tears of Repentance. It's an amazing high-impact pamphlet that you should take a look at. But these praying towns were placed all around Massachusetts, kind of like on the outskirts. Mashpee was one, on the outskirts before Mohawk country, because if the Mohawks attacked, they would attack the good Indians first before they got to the English. And that's what they were called back then, the good Indians, because they followed the rules, right? This right here is one of my relatives, Joel Coombs. He would have been the first graduating class of Harvard University, Native class in 1665. There was 5 students who went there, Native students. 3 were Nipmuc, 2 were Wampanoag, and only 1 graduated. And now he's known as Caleb today. And there's a book out there, Caleb's Crossing. What happened to my relative, Joel Coombs? 2 weeks before graduation, he was considered valedictorian, right? He went home to what is known as a vineyard today. And when he went home, on the way back, they stopped in Nantucket, and he was killed. And he was probably killed by his own people. We don't know, because there was still a lot of traditionalists around at the time. But what Harvard did back in 2009 is they invited my family up to Harvard, and they gave us a posthumous degree in his name. Yeah. To go back to the vineyard, like where he was from, his dad was Coombs' name, right? Coombs, during the 1640s, knew the King James Bible so well that he was preaching it to English people, their religion. But not everybody liked that, right? Not everybody liked that. There was a chief over Chappaquiddick, who called Coombs to Chappaquiddick and said, "What are you doing?" and punched him in the face. We have our own ways of doing things, but that's how times were. That's how times were, because it was after plague hit, it was so confusing. Imagine the leaders we lost, the medicine people off to the land. I can't even fathom that. I've been doing this for a number of years, 40 years, right? I still can't piece it all together, because that's all we have is a big puzzle, and you try to get it the best we can. And still I can't imagine how the structure was set up. So the 1660s was not pretty, because you had 2 different leaders, other leaders coming up. What happened after Massasoit died, his son Warm Sutter, they called Alexander, had to take leadership of Pokanoket. And Duxbury, I think it was Standish's family called Warm Sutter to Duxbury about what they called illegal land sales, which going back to land, there's no such thing as land sale, because we didn't believe in land. But by English standards, they did, because they started building fences around where they lived. And they said, if you saw a Native person walk across what they would call their backyard, they would say, "You can't be here no more, because this is mine." And you got a Native person thinking, what does that mean? This is yours. We had no concept of that way of thought. So Miles Standish asking Warm Sutter, Alexander, about these illegal land sales, and gave him something to eat, something to drink, kept his boy, and sent him on his way. On the way home, he died. who took over leadership was King Philip, known as King Philip today, Metacomet, and that was in 1662. And by that time, tension was really high. And come 1675, the bloodiest war per capita breaks out in New England, right? King Philip's War. I don't get too much in the battles and all that because a lot of people lost their lives on both sides. How Metacomet was found, he was actually founded by a native guide, believe it or not. There was a native guide who thought he was doing the right thing, who led Benjamin Church, Captain Benjamin Church, to Metacomet and Mount Hope in Bristol, Pokanoket, all the same thing. And when they found Metacomet Church, they dismantled his body limb by limb and took his head back to Plymouth and put it on a post for 20 years. That's to show other people this is what's going to happen to you if you rise up again, you know? But you know what? Metacomet had a boy. He also had a wife. They're saying, we can't kill them. That's not right. So what we can do is sell them as slaves, and that's what they did. So we lost the war, and for losers of the war, nothing really pretty happened for a long time. So slavery became legal, servitude, scalping was legal. And when these people, the only silver lining I can think about slavery for our people is there's folks down in Bermuda, right? After all those years as family being slaves, they still have their cultural identity. They know who they are as a people. And they come up to their powwow July 4th weekend in Mashpee. One year, next year we go down and see them, and we celebrate down there. So we're back and forth. And that happened to a lot of indigenous people around New England. So after that happens, you got a lot of laws popping up, right? Now, what is this one right here? We call this 1742 Massachusetts Indian Law. And what this states in the books, it says, if you're a remnant of a tribe in Massachusetts, that's what the term that was used for us at that time was remnants. You would have to move to one of 4 locations. You have to move to Mashpee. You have to move to Aquina, over the vineyard. You have to move to Heron Pond, which is along the canal, Cape Cod Canal, or you have to move to Grafton. If you're a Wampanoag person, you did probably move to Grafton because we knew that was Nipmuc country, but so the others dispersed. So Mashpee hasn't always been Mashpee. It's been diluted down with different communities, brought down with different communities. Same thing with Aquina. But those are the 2 biggest, largest communities of people today. And we all know why it was done. It was done over land. 1830 Removal Act. Oh yeah, this is where the Trail of Tears come by, right? And this is what a lot of people know of this is the Trail of Tears. But those people, federal agents, came to my area too, right, to Mashpee. And they came to us and were ready to take us away from our homeland to go out west, right? But there was one non-native voice that stood up, and he was an overseer, and he said, if you take the Mashpee Wampanoag people away from their homeland, they're gonna die. And the reason they're gonna die is they rely on seafood on their diet. So we were left alone. So we were left alone on our homeland. That's why we're still there today. It was that one English overseer said that. And this is where I'm from right here. This is a sign that you read going to Mashpee and leaving Mashpee. Incorporate 1870. That means to me, it means taken, right? Because after this was formed into a township in 1870, that's when a lot of land was taxed. We actually were given back 25 acres of our own land for each family, but now you're being taxed on this land, and that's, for us, we're not a wealthy people, so we lost a lot of that land back to the town. This is the same year which Aquina was also incorporated, 1870, over the vineyard. Whaling, this happened a lot during the 1800s, 1700s a little bit, you know. We were well-known whalers that literally went all around the world, period, right? And Ramona Peters, one of my elders, great person, great historian, culture keeper. Her and another man named Jason Mancini, who used to be the director of the Pequot Museum, produced a whaling exhibit at our Mashpee Wampanoag Museum itself. And how they put this together, a 5-year-old can read, right? It was very simple, but right to the point. It showed a global map, right? and it had red dots with numbers on it, all around the global map. And that's all you had to do is, okay, 14, Venezuela waters. Look at 14, you find out the name of the captain, the name of the ship, and what native people their names were brought on those ships, either voluntarily or not voluntarily, and if they came back. It was mutinies on these ships. A lot of people stayed in port voluntarily or not voluntarily. So there's literally indigenous people all around the world, right? And I found two of my family members, right? One was Oaks Coombs Sr. He would have been my great-great-uncle. He went to the west side of South America, came back. The other one went to the Pacific and came back. And these people really look highly upon it in the government. They were our selectmen. They were our town officials, the Mashpee Wampanoag, right? Yeah, amongst our government at that time. So this shows us going for small whales in our Mashpee. Our Mashpee, our boats got pretty big enough to carry 40 men. And this right here is from the Shinnecock Museum. Actually, I just got back last week. I helped them make a 12-foot boat over there. That was fun. But it shows their museum, right? A picture of their museum like this. And how we set up our boats, we set up like a funnel, right? At high tide, the low tide would go out, the fish would be caught in that funnel. The whale wouldn't be able to get out, and that's when we harpoon them, the small ones, not the big ones, just the small ones. That's my wife. That's Tootie. She teaches language. You know, we have our language back. Our language wasn't spoken for a number of years, right? Back in the early 1900s, this did not just happen to my people, it happened to a lot of cultures of people. If you weren't speaking English, you weren't speaking the right language. So what happened, you'd be made fun of, ridiculed. So what the parents told the kids is don't bother speaking your native tongue, whatever that may be, because I don't want you going through the same thing I went through when I was a kid. And it wasn't spoken, a little bit here and there. And we gradually started losing our language. This is a true story. If you haven't seen the documentary, take a look at it. It's called We Still Live Here. And it's about language. And the woman who helped bring the language back, her name being Jessie Little Doe Beard. She's Mashpee Wampanoag. She said she was having dreams, right? She said people coming into a dream speaking a different language, and it wasn't English. She said that people looked familiar faces from Mashpee but did not know their names. One of the dreams, the people came and spoke English to her. They said if the Mashpee Wampanoag had the opportunity to get their language back, would they say yes? So she took it upon herself, pretty much single-handedly, went to the community members and said, do you want to see our language spoken again? And of course, everybody said yes. So she went to MIT, graduated with a degree in linguistics, and started piecing the language back together again. How this was done? Through elders who could still speak some of the language, right? Similar language families. And, but what's kind of ironic, right? Think about this. What helped out probably the most is what John Eliot had done. Going back to that missionary, what John Eliot did, he recruited Wampanoag people and wrote the King James Bible in Wampanoag. And we have one of those first editions in our grasp. So the language is being retaught. We have a Montessori school that ranges from grade pre-K to second grade. And we try to get more teachers, and we try to add on grades as we go. But that's my wife's love right there, is language itself. Yeah. This is our government center. I should have a picture of it inside, but it's just a sign going down the New Seabury, down the South Cape Beach. You've probably seen that building before. This is where we have our government officials. We have our chair, our vice chair, our treasurer. We have human resources, natural resources, elders department, ICWA, education, which I'm part of. A lot of things happen in this building, right? And the biggest case I want to say that happened recently that affected our government that I can certainly recall, it wasn't that long ago, a few years back, is when our land got taken out of trust. And I want to say that was 2017, someone was around there. Our land, going back to land, is 291 acres in trust, and that was taken away. So we fought back. We had our researchers, our educators, and we spoke to our lawyers, and we coached them up on how to bring this to court again, bring the trials. And it was a Hail Mary, to be honest with you. We told them the facts of history, Because what they're saying, they say if you weren't under federal jurisdiction, this is the Department of the Interior was saying this, by 1934, you can't have land in trust. And so we brought him to court, we fought back, and I remember to this day, because I was out in my yard, raking the yard, and I remember listening to this trial on the radio, and I remember the judge saying to the Department of Interior's lawyer, do you know what the Carlisle School is? And she wouldn't answer the question. I'm going to ask you again, do you know what the Carlisle School is? Still wouldn't answer the question. And he said, you know what? I know, this judge was very fair. I know what you're doing. You're not answering the question for a reason, so I'll be back in a week or so with my decision. And he went in favor of have our land back in trust. If you folks don't know what the Carlisle School is, after the 1880s, what they call the Indian Wars was over, there were boarding schools set up. And Carlisle, Pennsylvania set up their first boarding schools. And during the 1880s, that's where the Mashpee Wampanoag children were taken to. And by the way, that was under federal jurisdiction in the 1880s. And you got you got the 1870, the Removal Act. What was his name who wrote those reports? But that was under federal jurisdiction too, so there was a lot of things that happened that the federal government had their fingers on with our people before 1934. So we have our 291 acres back in trust, which is our housing. A lot of it's wetlands in Middleborough. A lot of our ceremonial grounds, but it's not a whole lot of space for our people. We're still trying to have more. Yeah, so. See here. If you guys been to my powwow, right? No? If you haven't been, please come. This is July 4th weekend on right in Mashpee. I don't go over the bridge at all during that time. I try not to go over the bridge at all during the summertime. But it goes on for 3 days. We get about, I want to say, close to 10,000 guests a day coming through here. People bring their chairs, and there's a lot of indigenous foods, a lot of indigenous crafters. There's dancing, competition, inter-travels, which you guys can be part of. You know, one thing we teach, right? Like I've taught a lot over the years, and everybody gets this, right? Everybody, all ages get this, right? And because third grade is part of the curriculum today. And one thing that I end up with the kids, right? I go, because we have a little corner, a doll, right? We never put faces on our dolls. The reason we don't put faces on our dolls, we don't raise our kids, treat people differently just the way they appear, what they look like. And they get that. They understand that. So we come from one big race, which is called the human race. I go, little Johnny, you should respect little Jack, right? I'm not better than you, you're not better than me. We come from this big global picture here. We should look out for each other and take care of each other. And if you go through that, going through life, you're going to be all right. Hate is not taught. You're not born hating, you're taught that. So as we know. But yeah, we have a big celebration. We welcome our guests. We encourage them to be part of our dances, inter-tribals. Do get out there and do a two-step. Have some of our food. On our last day of the, speaking of food, on our last day of the powwow, if you come on the last day, we have a clam bake for 150 people. Which you can purchase a ticket if you like seafood and have lobsters, clams, mussels, crabs, and all that. So, yeah, please come out. But yeah, you guys are part of Land Conservatory, but I appreciate what you guys do. And like speaking about land one more time, it's very big for our people. It's like I said, right here is who we are. There's no separation. There's no line. Okay, this is that. This is this. This is part of who we are. We're here to take care of Mother Earth, be with Mother Earth. There's so much damage done over the years on the environment. That you guys want to hear a funny story? I think it's funny. I'll tell you real quick. All right, I did a talk over in Nantucket. It was about global warming, right? I was a keynote. And you had University of Miami up there, you had Yale, a few other colleges, all doing the same thing, trying to slow down or stop global warming. Nantucket, if you know Nantucket, they're losing a lot of we're all losing footage as the ocean rises, right? Because we know the islands was part of the mainland at one time, no longer. And I didn't get much of a reaction. I couldn't read the audience. My final slide I put up of the ocean in Nantucket with a question mark. And I think they got it. I don't know if they're happy, but now that's a strong possibility what might happen. So I'm willing right now to take on questions, guys. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and hopefully you enjoyed it, guys. Thank you. Yes.
I was just wondering about the various hairstyles. You see some long hair, some shaved, some mohawks. Was that a personal choice? Was it dictated by your status, or was scalping a custom during wartime?
Yeah, scalp. So both sides did scalping at one time or the other. It was legalized by the English government after the war. And it was legal even going on close to 1900s down in Texas, scalping. If you scalped a native woman who was pregnant, that's 2 scalps right there. Hairstyles. Mohawk being a nation of people, that's what they call the styles today, right? Which would be hair up top and length in the back and shaved on the sides. Yeah, that was a style. Another style would have been half and half. You had full, half and half shaved. 2 braids were very common amongst people, very common. If you're somebody that passed away in your family, or if there was a tragedy, a lot of time you would cut your hair. And that was a sign of mourning right there, something you're going through right there. So losing life it's a big, heavy ceremony. Life coming in, right, is a big ceremony. We come in to Mother Earth in a fetal position, so that's the way we go out. So a lot of the time our burial is in a fetal position, and you're facing southwest toward the creator. But the hairstyles would vary, yeah, long hair, sometimes shaved. Yeah, so, yes. No, you. Yeah.
I know that Wampanoag is considered a matriarch.
Yeah. I know that for a fact. You just saw my wife. If you know my wife, yeah, she's a strong woman, Wampanoag woman, yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a woman. See, the thing about this, some cultures that didn't have respect a whole lot for the woman, and other cultures that did. And for us being matriarchal, everything goes to the mother's line. We have women chiefs, we have women leaders. Our women are highly, highly respected. You got to respect anything that gives life, right? The woman controls everything that goes on in the house. Divorce wasn't a big thing back then. Normally, if you're set to get married to a person, you're set. It's a heavy ceremony that goes behind that. And but if divorce did happen, the only thing the woman would have to do is take the man's belongings and put it out in front of the door.
Yeah, that's fine.
Today it's out the window now. It's out the door, and by that time you know something was coming, so it was time for him to leave. Yeah, so we have clan mothers today, and clan mothers, we have, I think 7 in my community. They're very highly respected. You have to earn that title to be a clan mother. And if they see the leadership not going the right way, they can change leaderships. It's up to them, what they want to do. But there are certain people who run the government, councilmen, leaders, chiefs, but the clan mothers can supersede as a group as all of them. So yeah, our women are highly respected. And you hear the term medicine man, and most of our spiritual leaders are medicine women. They might not have the title, but people know my community who are the ones to go to if they need our spiritual guidance. So, hope I answered your question like that for you. Thank you. And like I said, my wife is Wampanoag. I've been married in years, 23 years. I got 4 girls, yeah. So I knew that. I knew it was her when we got together, so we just worked.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, there's a lot of, 4 girls, 4 daughters, and yeah. Yes, there's a lot of power there, right? Sure, definitely. Any other questions, folks? Yes.
How far back does your last name go?
Well, you got Darius Coombs, which I mentioned during the 1640s, right? He was well known what is known as Edgartown today, and that's where he lives, right? It's my name goes back quite a bit, and it says, I'm Mashpee Wampanoag, which for a fact I know I am. But I did this talk over Nantucket years back at the NHA over there, and my grandparents lived over Nantucket, and My grandfather, I knew for what was Wampanoag, Mashpee. My grandmother, Ruth West, they call her Red Feather. She did the same thing I do. She went around and educated people. And I thought she was Nantucket Wampanoag, right? I wasn't sure. I was kind of guessing, really. And I mentioned that during the talk I was doing, and there was an elder woman shaking her head like this. I go, I got to talk to this woman. So she came up to me and she goes, Darius, Ruth wasn't Mashpee Wampanoag or Nantucket Wampanoag. I said, okay, how do you know that? I grew up with her, Darius. I was friends with her. And her name was Fran. She was a local genealogist of the island. I said, okay, you grew up with her, but how do you know she wasn't Mashpee or Nantucket still? She goes, when her brother who lived with your grandparents passed away, the people from Aquina came over and got his body and brought it back home. Then she said, you know what, Rice? She wrote a book called The Other Islanders, and she broke my genealogy down on my grandmother's side. And it goes back to Aquina, and you go farther back, it goes back to Chappaquiddick. But I don't say that all the time because it's funny. I know how it is. Like people come up to you, I'm Wampanoag, Mashpee Wampanoag. And I did that because everybody knows me as Mashpee Wampanoag. When I went to Aquina, which I know I have a lot of friends up there, I said, by the way, I'm Aquina too, guys. They looked at me. It's all about protecting the community, and I get that. But I really want to go more into the genealogy on her side. But Fran broke it down how it is. So yeah. So I was asking their genealogist, and we'll look it up for you, I said, all right, thank you. So, yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much for these personal stories.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Could you explain a little bit about those deaths by the people in this area and the remaining folks and their attitude toward repopulating the area? Was there a intention there, and was there any success in respect to active play?
Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, that's like a two-part question, right? You had there.
Cool.
And it's hard to, like I said, that's the biggest thing I have a problem with. Is not a problem, but I just don't know how it was. Like I said, how it was pre-contact, because I have this debate back and forth with Ramona Peters, my teacher, right? She feels like Massasoit was the leader of everybody, the supreme sachem, and I respectfully disagree. And I respectfully disagree because it's very hard to govern so many communities having one person do that. I don't see that a whole lot happen. And we know for a fact, because we did the study, we know for a fact that we know the names of the communities, we know their names of the chiefs even back in the 1600s, and we know how they interacted with the colonists, and that if they interacted with the colonists, what kind of relations they had. The reason I disagree with Ramona is because that's who the English dealt with all the time. That's who they wrote about all the time. They're in the primary sources, So when the colonists arrived in what is known as Plymouth today, they arrived for a perfect time for them. It was the worst time for us. That whole area was decimated. There was so many bodies out there that they couldn't even bury the bodies. The bones are scattered bones everywhere. Like I say, I try to put myself in that time, imagine the sisters, the brothers, the medicine people, the councilmen, the chiefs that we lost. It's hard to understand that. And the network it was. Ramona might be absolutely right, but from the studies I've done, it's hard to say, And the intertwining of networks going across the country, what we had was amazing, Things we knew about each other, how we traveled back then. Like I'll give you an example, like for like Nantucket, right? Back in the 1660s, Nantucket was a praying town. And there was a praying Indian over Nantucket who was talking a lot of bad stuff about Massasoit. Metacom heard about this, about his father. He wasn't happy, so what he did, he went to what is known as New Bedford today and got numerous 40-man boats. Our boats were big, carry 40 people, and got his men together and went to Nantucket like it was going across the street, like it was nothing, and found that man. That guy didn't have a good day. So many words, yeah. So it was, I could tell you if that plague hit, it didn't hit, history would have literally been different today. because this whole area was populated with people, you know? The effects of that one plague that happened, the time was perfect for the English when they got here. So, yes.
There's a pond here in Orleans called Cascade Manson.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a long time originated word? Do you know what its meaning is and why?
No, I'm not. That's, I know words and phrases. I'm relearning it. My wife would know better. I'll have to ask her. But I do a lot of stuff today. I do a lot of teaching. I'm in the schools, and we serve 7 districts in our education department. I work with the tribal youth. And I didn't realize this, right, until I worked right into the schools, how much trauma there is going amongst a lot of kids, but especially our kids. I got a group of tribal boys that aged grades 3 through 6 in that school program, and I got 12 of them, right? And out of those 12 boys, 2 got mother and father at home. The others either foster, grandmother, one parent, or maybe aunt or uncle taking care of. And that's some trauma right there. So what I do is just being there in the schools when I'm expected to be there. And if you're not there, they get upset. They get mad at you. Where were you, Darius? Mr. D. I'm like, I was in the hospital. No, so they expect you to just be there, do lunch bunches, just hang out with them. Just being there so big. Because sometimes they don't have that, the smallest things, yeah. And I get it, because my raising was kind of similar to a lot of them. I lost my dad and my mom around the same time when I was young. So I get that, fully get that. Yes? The boarding schools? Oh my gosh. I think boarding schools were around for a long time, and they're in the 1970s. Yeah, and what's been unturned with these boarding schools is nothing pretty, You know, I got friends who make them up in Canada, who from New Brunswick, close friends. And he's my age, he got taken 2 years in boarding schools. And I knew this guy, I've known this guy for 40 years, and he's never brought those stories up. And think about up in Canada, what they call the First Nations people, they're getting financial assistance for telling their stories on what happened to them. And that was the hardest thing to him to do that interview, put it that way, about what happened to him. And I never knew that all those years. He would never talk about it. The things they went through, the abuse, the washing, of the culture away. So, you guys, there's a documentary called Dawnland out there, produced by Upstander Productions. And what I remember from this documentary of Dawnland is, I'll never forget this. You had 2 elder women, right? And they were saying when they were in these boarding schools, they were sitting in the tub, they would scrub their arms until it was bleeding so they can turn white to get rid of the tan color. Yeah, because they felt like they would be more accepted. And a lot of the time, that's the way I thought it continues on amongst, because that's part of how people are. Those same people who are friends with up in Quebec, New Brunswick, or Mi'kmaq, there's one reservation really up isolated near the Gaspé Bay up there in northern Quebec, a reservation called Gaskabediak. And my friend's wife's aunt, who's a teacher up there, and I don't agree with her at all with this, she said, these people can still speak their own language. They can still speak Mi'kmaq, but she's not teaching Mi'kmaq in the schools. She's teaching French. The reason I go, why are you doing this? And when you still have your language, because they have better opportunity, guys, that's why. I go, why can't you do both? I didn't get it.
But maybe we'll come off public questions here, but let's hear it one more time for Darius. Just a hot.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the night, guys. Thank you very much. Katabatash. You're welcome.